I just wanted to add some extra context to this video. I found a great tweet by Caitlin Johnstone that highlights the dangers of this conflict and of this specific situation in reference to chemical laboratories and biological weapons. And it also relates back to Syria and the false flag operations that were undertaken there in order to provide a narrative that would ensure Western support for rebel factions. In Syria, it was jihadists. In Ukraine, it'll be neo-Nazis. So this story's got a lot into it, and it's super important, so we're going to get right in. Russia and China have accused the United States of having biological weapons facilities within Ukraine and other countries around the world, but let's dig into it. This is the accusation from Russia. This is from one of their state media networks. A network of 30 biolaboratories was created in Ukraine, Russian military. Some of them were research laboratories and others sanitary epidemiological ones. Chief of Russia's Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Protection Force, Igor Krylyov, specified. A network of more than 30 biological laboratories was formed in the Ukrainian territory at the request of the US Department of Defense's Threat Reduction Agency, the chief of Russia's Radiation, Chemical, Biological Protection Force, Igor Krylyov, said on Monday. The Russian Defense Ministry has repeatedly drawn attention to the military biological programs the Pentagon is implementing in the post-Soviet space. In Ukraine, a network of more than 30 biological laboratories was created. So there's the accusation. And these accusations have been swirling for a while. This has been an argument for years, but it became a hot topic very recently because Russia made that fresh round of accusations because they've been sweeping through Ukraine with their military force and they're uncovering labs, supposedly. So Marco Rubio has one of our good friends on the stand to testify, and let's hear what they have to say to each other. They're talking the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and Rubio brings up an important question.
I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
So there's our good friend Victoria Nuland, one of the chief architects. Wow, I can't even speak. One of the chief architects of the 2014 Maidan coup in Ukraine. So she would be a good person to ask about the subject of Ukraine. So seemingly, what I'm getting from this interaction is she let on a little more truth than Marco Rubio expected her to. And that's when he threw in that whole Russia false flag question as well, to kind of steer attention away from the fact that, yes, we do have these, quote, research facilities there. But let's move along. So this is from over a year ago. The prevailing narrative now in Western media is that this is all Russian disinformation. You know, of course, the United States are just good guys, and this is all Russian disinformation, and they're trying to use it as a pretext for their invasion, which is ridiculous because the invasion's already happened. They don't, it's not a pretext. It'd be like a during text or a post text. But anyway, they're trying to say it's, Russia trying to justify their illegal war in Ukraine. And, maybe it's just the fact that Russia is uncovering crimes. Russia is... yes, doing an illegal war, but we've gone through the West's responsibility in this illegal war. We are escalating it, NATO expansion, ripping up of nuclear treaties, coup d'etats of sovereign Ukrainian governments, blocking of the Nord Stream pipeline. The list goes on and on. But anyway, this is over a year ago. Growing protests over threat of U.S. bioweapons. This is from New Age. The spread of coronavirus infection in the world has inadvertently forced the leading powers of the UN to open their eyes to many issues and, above all, to comply with provisions of the International Biological Weapons Convention. Before the coronavirus, Washington consistently ignored statements by official authorities in Russia, China, and the CIS states regarding the Pentagon's network of military biolaboratories. The United States reportedly has 1,495 biological laboratories in 25 countries and regions, including the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and the former Soviet Union, that are not accountable to the governments of the countries where they operate and operate with a lack of transparency. In Ukraine alone, the U.S. has opened 16 biological laboratories, some of which have seen large-scale outbreaks of infectious diseases. According to the USA Today, hundreds of accidental human contacts with deadly microorganisms have occurred in biological laboratories in the United States and abroad since 2003 to the present. These contacts can lead to the infection with any lethal virus from such laboratories and then spread to the population and provoke an epidemic. And at this point, it is appropriate to recall that the extremely dangerous strain of avian influenza H5N1 was bred in laboratory conditions by the Dutch scientist Ron Fauchier, together with scientists from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the United States. The issue of the United States doing its biological dirty work in, the regions of the world that are going to have less scrutiny, it's been going on a long time. Of course, the United States is doing its worst biological research in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe, where human life has less value in the eyes of imperialists and the imperialist media and imperialist institutions as well. Let's also learn about how the U.S. directly is involved with funding biological research that may not be kosher back here in the United States in foreign laboratories. And this example hits right here at home: Wuhan, coronavirus, COVID-19. New details emerge about coronavirus research at Chinese lab. More than 900 pages of materials related to the U.S.-funded coronavirus research in China were released following a FOIA lawsuit by The Intercept. Newly released documents provide details of the U.S.-funded research on several types of coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. The Intercept has obtained more than 900 pages of documents detailing the work of EcoHealth Alliance, a U.S.-based health organization that used federal money to fund bat coronavirus research at the Chinese laboratory. Interesting. The trove of documents includes 2 previously unpublished grant proposals that were funded by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, as well as project updates relating to EcoHealth Alliance's research, which has been scrutinized amid increased interest in the origins of the pandemic. So interesting here. This is a roadmap to the high-risk research that could have led to the current pandemic, said Gary Rushkin, executive director of the U.S. Right to Know, a group that has been investigating the origins of COVID-19. One of the grants, titled Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence, outlines an ambitious effort led by EcoHealth Alliance President Peter Daszak to screen thousands of bat samples for novel coronaviruses. The research also involved screening people who work with live animals. The documents contain several critical details about the research in Wuhan, including the fact that key experimental work with humanized mice was conducted at a biosafety level 3 lab at Wuhan University Center for Animal Experiment and was not at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, as was previously assumed. The documents raise additional questions about the theory that the pandemic may have begun in a lab accident, an idea that Daszak has aggressively dismissed. The bat coronavirus grant provided EcoHealth Alliance with a total of $3.1 million, including almost $600,000 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology used in part to identify and alter bat coronaviruses likely to infect humans. And what are they doing to alter them? They're making them more contagious. in a lot of cases more lethal as well. Even before the pandemic, many scientists were concerned about the potential dangers associated with such experiments. The grant proposal acknowledges some of those dangers. Fieldwork involves the highest risk of exposure to SARS and other COVIDs and other coronaviruses while working in caves with high bat density overhead and the potential for fecal dust to be inhaled. So we're using federal money to do very risky research and gain-of-function research. Let's listen into, former Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, now currently I don't know what, but she's on the money here with this one.
Are the undeniable facts. There are 25 to 30 U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. According to the U.S. government, these biolabs are conducting research on dangerous pathogens. Ukraine is in an active war zone with widespread bombing, artillery, and shelling, and these facilities, even in the best of circumstances, could easily be compromised and release these deadly pathogens. Now, like COVID, these pathogens know no borders. If they are inadvertently or purposely breached or compromised, they will quickly spread all throughout Europe, the United States, and the rest of the world, causing untold suffering and death. So in order to protect the American people, the people of Europe, the people around the world, these labs need to be shut down immediately, and the pathogens that they hold need to be destroyed. Instead of trying to cover this up, the Biden-Harris administration needs to work with Russia, Ukraine, NATO, the UN to immediately implement a ceasefire for all military action in the vicinity of these labs until they're secured and these pathogens are destroyed. In addition to all this, the U.S. funds around 300 biolabs around the world who are engaging in dangerous research, including gain of function, similar to the lab in Wuhan, where COVID-19 may have originated from. Now, after realizing how dangerous and vulnerable these labs are, they should have all been shut down 2 years ago, but they haven't. Now, this is not a partisan political issue. The administration and Congress need to act now for the health and well-being of every American and every person on this planet.
You're right, Tulsi. It's not partisan. There is actually bipartisan consensus from both the Democrats and Republicans to do nefarious shit like that. That's their specialty. But Tulsi's right. We should be doing all we can with these nuclear reactors, with these chemical weapons to be ending these hostilities, but instead things are ramping up. So here we have a few different articles. If you just Google, biolabs, Ukraine, this is what you're going to see. Fact check false claims of biolabs, Ukraine biolabs, ongoing Russian disinformation campaign. U.S. intel head rejects Russia's claims about Ukraine biolabs. Tulsi Gabbard latest to push Russian-backed conspiracy about U.S. biolabs. There are no U.S.-run biolabs in Ukraine, contrary to social media posts. Newsweek was mentioned earlier. Here's another article from Newsweek. U.S. says Ukraine diagnostic biodefense labs have no biological weapons. A State Department spokesperson has clarified the nature of biological research facilities in Ukraine at the center of dueling accusations between the U.S. and Russian officials. Moscow has alleged to have uncovered a plot by Kiev to unleash biological or chemical weapons as a pretext for blaming Russia and drawing in further support for Ukraine's efforts to resist a military incursion from the neighboring nation. Asked by Florida Senator Marco Rubio whether Ukraine had biological chemical weapons. So we've seen this video, right? This is rehashing what Victoria Nuland told Marco Rubio, that there are facilities there, that they're working with local Ukrainians to secure these facilities, and they're really nervous that the Russians could grab a hold of these facilities and then use them to cause damage. So They're saying two things that don't quite make sense. They're claiming there are no biological weapons, but at the same time, they're saying there's a danger if these facilities are, fall into the wrong hands. So that means that there are weapons there, or there are objects there that could be easily turned into weapons. Rubio then cited what he called Russian propaganda claims that Ukraine was planning a biological or chemical false flag attack, and asked Nuland if she had any doubt, should such an attack occur, that Russia was actually behind it. There's no doubt in my mind, Senator. And it's a classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they are planning to do themselves. So another thing that you're going to see often, and once you're aware of it, you'll see it all the time in the news, is they constantly make up this ridiculous notion that Russia is the only place on the planet where people practice projection. And it's super ironic because they're the ones indeed projecting all of their nefarious activities upon Russia. I'm not saying Russia is an innocent actor, but the U.S. is projecting all of its nefarious activities upon Russia preemptively. And then, if the U.S. turns around if Russia turns around and finds any evidence of anything, we could, they're projecting. They're making it up. This is a classic Russian playbook. You're going to see it a lot. I'm doing a story later where one of our good friends from the State Department repeats that talking point, and it's pretty funny. But a State Department spokesperson defended Washington's position, telling Newsweek that Undersecretary Nuland was referring to Ukrainian diagnostic and biodefense laboratories during her testimony, which are not biological weapons facilities. So this is just wordplay. This is semantics. Because they're going to say legally these are places to research biological weapons so we can make antidotes. Well, so of course we have biological weapons there, but these aren't weapons. They're biological weapons to do research. It's just a semantic game they're playing. These institutions counter biological threats throughout the country, the spokesperson said. How do they counter those threats? The spokesperson also reinforced Nuland's dismissal of the allegations and her concerns over what Russia itself may be planning. Throughout the crisis, Russia has baselessly alleged it is under threat, including from Ukraine and from NATO, and has alleged Ukraine plans to use chemical and biological weapons. The spokesperson said, "As we said all along, Russia is continuing to invent false pretexts to justify the horrific actions in Ukraine." I mean, I've done a few videos on this already. Russia is most certainly under threat, and many high status U.S. officials, present and past, have stated so. This has long been accepted knowledge for decades. It's only in the past month that it's now ridiculous to say that NATO expansion is a threat to Russian security. Anyway, neither the United States nor NATO has any desire or intention for conflict with Russia. We are unwavering in our commitment to extend deterrence and confident in our ability to defend ourselves, our allies, and our partners. Spokesperson also stated that Ukraine is in compliance with the Biological Weapons Convention, while the same cannot be said for Russia, which has an active biological weapons program and is in violation of the BWC. So here it goes. We're totally in compliance. Nothing to see here. It's Russia. Russia's bad. The White House also weighed in on the affair Wednesday as Press Secretary Jen Psaki addressed the claims directly in a series of tweets. "We took note of Russia's false claims about the alleged U.S. biological weapons labs and chemical weapons development in Ukraine. We've also seen Chinese officials echo these conspiracy theories," Psaki wrote. "This is preposterous. It is the kind of disinformation operation we've seen repeatedly from the Russians over the years in Ukraine and in other countries, which have been debunked, and an example of the type of false pretext we have been warning the Russians would invent." So that's, again, the sneaky Russian narrative. Only Russians do sneaky things. They're the only ones who do tradecraft spy stuff. They're always projecting. It's ridiculous. She said the U.S., too, is in full compliance with its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and the Biological Weapons Convention and does not develop or possess such weapons anywhere, which is absolute nonsense and bullshit. I know Russia has biological and chemical weapons, and I know the United States does, and I know Great Britain does. They all have biological weapons laboratories where they do research to protect ourselves. And in that research labs, they always have weaponized biological and chemical viruses and such. That's how they do the quote research. If you want to believe the moral argument that it's all about protecting people and research, you need the actual weapon there to do research on it, to make an antidote for it. Okay? And like the State Department spokesperson with whom Newsweek spoke, she said it was Russia that has a long and well-documented track record of using chemical weapons, including in attempted assassinations like the poisoning of Putin's political enemies like Alexei Navalny. So they're going to act like now Russia has a well-documented track record of using chemical weapons, like Putin is some kind of madman, and the U.S. is going to ignore, their long history of using chemical weapons themselves. Agent Orange, all the shit they spray on protesters constantly. I mean, the list goes on and on. We use chemical weapons. And, when you look at Western media, you would think the United States is a goddamn angel just trying to intervene on the side of freedom and democracy. And in the reality, they're a belligerent imperial power in decline, grasping desperately at anything to try and maintain its grip. This is all an obvious ploy by Russia to try to justify its further premeditated, unprovoked, and unjustified attack on Ukraine. Now that Russia has made these false claims and China has seemingly endorsed this propaganda, we should all be on the lookout for Russia to possibly use chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine or to create a false flag operation using them. It's a clear pattern. So this is super scary. What I read from this is that the U.S. is willing to do a false flag chemical attack operation, because they have done those in Syria. What's crazy is that they're now willing to do it in in Ukraine, when we're on the brink of World War III. We were already on the brink of World War III when we were at odds with Russia in Syria, and I was talking about this years ago, how we're ramping up to World War III with that. This is a whole other extra level. Oh, and I found this funny. There is so much propaganda within this article, like built in, like the advertisements are. The top, one of the first paragraphs was an in-cut of a video, like, President Zelensky tells Russian soldiers they still have time not to fight to save their souls, or some stupid bullshit. And here's some more stupid bullshit. Right? The whole article is Russia is evil, chemical weapons. They're lying about chemical weapons. If there are chemical weapons, we got to protect them. There aren't any chemical weapons. If there are chemical weapons, Russia's going to use them. There are all these ridiculous narratives. And here's a picture of Zelensky in some kind of mobile hospital tent with some army guys, right? President Zelensky visits the Ukrainian Armed Forces 66th Military Mobile Hospital in Donetsk, near the front lines of a years-long war with Russia-aligned separatists on April 11, 2020. After Russia launched military intervention in Ukraine on behalf of the rebels in late 2022, U.S. Undersecretary for State Political Affairs Victoria Nuland raised the alarm over Russian forces potentially gaining control of biological facilities in Ukraine, but U.S. officials dismissed Moscow's claims that such sites were being used to create or store biological weapons. Why are we including a picture from like 3 years ago of him visiting a frontline hospital? It's weird. Like, we're admitting that the war is more than a month old with this picture, but we're also pretending like he's some kind of hero who would visit his troops and never use chemical weapons. He's on the front line of his own country. Like, Donetsk is part of his own country, and they have separatists there because they have a coup-aligned government that's in cahoots with Nazis. And, the people in eastern Ukraine are ethnically Russian, and they don't get along with Nazis. it's just so weird, the propaganda that's out there. So they're showing a 2-year-old picture of him, 5 years into the war of, bombing his own country as if he's some kind of hero. And the whole article is, bullshit propaganda. We don't have any chemical weapons there, but if we do, we got to protect them from the Russians because the Russians will use them against Ukrainians, and then they'll blame it on us, and then we'll blame it on them, and then blah, 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 blah. Ridiculous. But I wanted to wrap this video up. It's getting very long, but I wanted to wrap it up with a clip from Glenn. Glenn did a similar video on the topic, and he nails it like always, and I just wanted to give him his time to speak.
Minute excerpt from a TED Talk by Andrew Weber, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs in October 2017, who described what he said were his years-long work at getting under control all of the different biological and chemical weapons in former Soviet republics, including Kazakhstan and Ukraine and other former Soviet republics. And in this clip, he describes the anthrax programs that were in Ukraine. And again, he's saying we did something heroic. We worked with the Soviet republics to get them under control. But he's also acknowledging, at least as of 2017, the existence of active anthrax programs in Ukraine. Listen to what he says.
The threat. Here I am in Kiev, Ukraine, with a brand new junior senator from Illinois. It's at a public health laboratory, and he looks concerned, and it's because from this kitchen-like refrigerator behind me, the director of the health lab handed me this tray with vials of Bacillus anthracis. That's the bacteria that causes anthrax. And we mapped many facilities like this throughout the Soviet Union. We were concerned that groups like Al-Qaeda and later ISIS could get their hands on these seed materials, starter cultures, to develop biological weapons for terrorist attacks. And we had a big program to consolidate and secure these dangerous pathogen collections, some of which had been left over from the Soviet biological weapons program.
Now, again, his point is the same as the State Department's. We do work with biological weapons programs in former Soviet republics like Ukraine, but our only goal when doing so is to secure them, shut them down, take them out of there, and we succeeded. But again, that leads to the question, which has not been answered, about why it is that Victoria Nuland says that these biological weapons, these biological research facilities are so dangerous that she's worried deeply that they would fall into Russian hands, and we're working to secure them. What would be in those labs in 2022 in Ukraine, right on the other side of the Russian border, that would be so dangerous that you would be worried about that? We can't say for certain whether the Russians and the Chinese on the one hand or the US and the Ukrainians on the other are telling the truth about whether there are biological weapons programs or biological labs in Ukraine. We know for certain, because Victoria Nuland said it, that there are biological research facilities there. And while we don't know what she meant, we know that those are very dangerous. That's why they're worried about it falling into Russian hands. And the point of all of this is that we should know. We have to know. Not, again, because it would mean that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is justifiable if it turns out the US and the Ukrainians are working together on biological weapons, but it would certainly mean that the US government's denials are false, and we should know what it is that the US government is doing, both in Ukraine and generally, when it comes to the deeply consequential question of whether the US government is developing biological and chemical weapons.
Can't add much more than that. Thanks for closing it down, Glenn. Appreciate all your hard work, brother.
What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils? Huh?